That time Rimuru got a daughter. By Asora09. The Teddy Bear Incident. Third-person perspective. Inside a dark castle, a gathering of special people was taking place. They were those who stood at the top of the food chain in this world, beings with supreme power that terrified the world with their physical tyranny. The Demon Lords. Currently, there were 3 of those individuals in one of the rooms of this sinister castle. Fu. The first of them was Marionette Master Clayman, the owner of this elegant castle, and thus the host of this reunion. He's laughing creepily again, Noda. The second one present in the room was one of the oldest and strongest demon lords, the destroyer, Milam Nava. That said, even though she was feared as an unstoppable physical force, her personality was nothing befitting of her position as one of the strongest. Milam was getting goosebumps and shuddering in her seat as she watched Clayman go into his own little world, perhaps plotting something as he always did. Don't mind him. The third voice in the room carried a different feeling from that of the other 2. If Clayman's voice represented arrogance with a bit of elegance, and Milam's represented childishness, then this third voice represented strength and oppressiveness. The voice was well complemented with the toned body of its owner. He was none other than Beastmaster Carrion, sitting with his arms crossed. Fu. I can't help it. This is quite an interesting development, you see. But well, it is not as if you muscleheads could understand such a thing. Clayman began speaking as he belittled his fellow demon lords, as he always did. That was perhaps Clayman's most distinguishable feature, his arrogance. There is something going on with this forest. First there is the matter with Veldora's disappearance, and now this recent rampage of magicules whose source we are yet to identify. Both Milam and Carrion decided to remain silent, waiting for Clayman to continue. They were all gathered there due to Clayman's call, after all. We should speed up our plans regarding the orcs. If we time it well, we should be able to avoid any problems regarding whatever caused Veldora's disappearance and that magicule explosion. Clayman explained what was supposed to be the way in which they should proceed with their plans considering everything that was going on. That being said, Clayman simply wanted to divert attention from the event he previously mentioned. Most specifically, he wanted to keep his interest in the mysterious magicule collision a secret from the others. Even though Clayman didn't say it out loud, he understood very well that such an event could be very beneficial if handled correctly, especially if what occurred was exactly as Clayman pictured. The behavior of those magicules was very similar to that of magicules during combat, and considering the amount released, the people involved must be quite formidable. If I am able to discover who they are, I should be able to bring them under my wing. That was what was going through Clayman's mind at this very moment. Of course, when he referred to, bring them under my wing, he was referring to the action of deceiving and manipulating them as he pleases, just as he does with everybody else. Fu. Clayman was so drowned in his arrogance that he didn't even notice the several holes in his plan. The plotting master Clayman was failing to consider 2 most crucial questions. First, what to do if the individuals in question are too strong for him to handle, and second, what to do if his manipulation proves fruitless. To him, no random being found in the forest would be a threat to him. A certain silver-haired and lovely wife would be grinding Clayman's head in the ground if she ever found out he was thinking such a thing, but there was no way Clayman would ever know that. Demon Lord Clayman. While that mess of thoughts was spinning around in Clayman's mind, a fourth voice joined the conversation. Indeed, a fourth voice, which should be non-existent in this room where only 3 people were present. Clayman turned his head to the right in surprise, and there, he observed how the door to this room, his room, was being held open by a beautiful woman in a maid uniform. She had a beauty that was nearly blinding, with smooth silky silver hair and white porcelain skin. She had heterochromatic eyes, one of a beautiful tone of blue, and the other with a burning tone of red. However, despite that almost ethereal beauty, Clayman's attention was nearly instantly diverted to the individual who the door is being held open for. It was a man with blonde hair and a well-marked body. He was wearing a jet black cape over a refined black suit with golden embroidery, and in his mouth, a pair of sharp teeth could be seen. He was the bloody Lord Roy Valentine, another member of the 10 great demon lords, and a vampire. Every inch of his body screamed danger as he walked imposingly into the room. The maid closed the door behind him while he sat down on the chair opposite to that of Clayman. Demon Lord Valentine. Clayman was shuddering a bit under the intense pressure this mighty vampire emitted, but he did his best to hide it, and it worked, effectively appearing to remain calm on the surface. He wasn't the only one bewildered. Carrion, who was still arm-crossed in the chair, tensed the moment he saw Roy coming into the room. That was just how dangerous this man was, enough to make everybody regard him as a menace only by being present. The only exception to that bewildered state was Milim. As expected of the destroyer, you could say, but the truth is that she was indeed bewildered, but by another thing. Milim was staring deeply at the maid who entered with Roy, who now was standing on the back of the room elegantly with her beautiful eyes closed. In the midst of the staring, the maid opened one of her eyes for a second and made eye contact with Milim. It was a cold glare that Milim received from the maid. Had it been any of the younger demon lords, they would have probably snapped at the maid for this, but not Milim. Because she knew the true identity of this beautiful maid. That is why Milim understood very well what the maid intended to say with that glare: "Don't you dare say a thing." "Yes, Nota." Milim shivered a bit as she answered in her mind and delivered a brief nod at the maid. Milim was suddenly feeling tense from receiving Lumino, the maid's glare. If it was a contest of strength, Milim would undoubtedly win, but there was something about the maid that made her incredibly intimidating. "Ho ho ho, Demon Lord Valentine, what brings you here today?" Having calmed himself down, Clayman decided to prompt the conversation forward. He had to discover Valentine's motives as fast as possible to prevent any hindrances to his plan. "A subordinate of mine informed me there had been a large collision of magicules in the forest of Jura." Roy was able to see through his thoughts, and thus decided to comply and go directly to the topic he wanted to discuss. "Oh, and what may that have to do with my person?" Clayman feigned ignorance in front of the overwhelming vampire. "Refrain from playing around with me." Roy's face twisted into that of disgust, glaring lightly at Clayman, who raised his right eyebrow in response. Then, Roy began eyeing the room, most specifically, the other two demon lords and a glass ball lying on the table. He turned his eyes away and snapped his fingers, prompting the maid to go forward and present him with a glass of red wine. "I have known for quite a long time about your plans in the forest of Jura. Making a puppet demon lord, was it?" Roy gently stirred his glass with his hand's movement before bringing it to his mouth. "How did he know about my plans?" In the meantime, Clayman was panicking a bit. He turned his eyes toward Milan and Carrion, perhaps thinking they might have leaked some intel out. "Do not bother. It is simply that my intelligence team is superior to yours." Roy's comment made Clayman's blood boil for a moment, but he was able to maintain calm. He could not afford to lose composure here before so many guests. That was an essential matter when it came to cajoling Milim and Carrion into helping him achieve his ultimate goal. "Regardless, is that magicule explosion related to your plans?" Clayman began pondering how to answer Roy's question. If he said it was related, Roy would pry even further into his plans in search of the cause of the explosion. However, if he denied the connection, Roy would investigate the matter personally, and thus Clayman would lose the big opportunity he was picturing earlier. That's good enough of an answer. Not even 5 seconds had passed before Roy lost interest in Clayman and stood up from his seat. "I will investigate that matter personally. While you do not get in my way, I will not get in yours either. Feel free to create your puppet demon lord or whatever." Roy began walking toward the exit of the room. His maid was already waiting for him at the door, and the moment he came close, she opened it for him. "Oh, but do take into consideration that any attempt at getting in my way will receive proper retribution. Thus, refrain from plotting anything that involves me, or whatever caused that magicule disaster. Do not overestimate your abilities." Leaving those words behind, Roy exited the room with his maid following in tow. There was silence a few seconds after the door closed. Foo. Clayman was once again laughing creepily as before Roy entered. "Let's proceed faster with our plan. The quicker we obtain that puppet demon lord, the best. I'll inform Gelmit. And then, with his help, I will teach you the consequences of underestimating me, Demon Lord Valentine." Foo. Clayman added such words in his mind. "Urgh, his face looks creepy." Nota. Milim began retreating in her seat as she saw Clayman being Clayman. "Let's begin with the forest invasion tomorrow." Clayman decided to ignore Milim's rude comment, and instead presented the changes in the operation. "Isn't that a bit too soon?" Nota. No, we can't allow Demon Lord Valentine to catch up anymore with our plan. Thus, it is required for us to move forward." Clayman calmly answered Milim's question. "And even if we speed up our plans, there is no new risk involved." It would be different if Veldora was active in the forest, but now that he disappeared, there's nothing to worry about. I see. Well, the quicker the better, I guess. If you need help, just tell me. The one who said that wasn't Milam, but rather Carrion. He stood up from his chair and prepared to leave. I should get going too, Noda. Milam did the same as Carrion and started walking through the now open door. Foo, alright. We'll meet again soon. After listening to those words, Milam and Carrion left the room. Foo. Wait and see, Demon Lord Valentine. I will spell your doom. Clayman remained seated in the silent room while a sinister smile appeared in his face. Hollow diamond. Near the border of the Jura forest, two figures were walking, one in front of the other. The one in front was a beautiful woman with heterochromatic eyes and wearing a maid dress, and the one following was a blonde man with an imposing aura. Needless to say, they were the Queen of Nightmares, Luminous Valentine, and her retainer Roy Valentine. What do you think, my queen? Roy, having left his demon lord disguise behind, asked. Clayman has nothing to do with that explosion. Luminous didn't bother to turn behind and look at Roy as she answered. Forgive my ignorance, but shouldn't we do something about Clayman? Roy sounded a bit doubtful, as if ashamed to ask such a question. Roy was a prideful and arrogant man, and thus refused to classify a man as Clayman as a menace. Still, he couldn't ignore any possibility in front of his queen. No. What we should focus on right now is investigating the mysterious phenomenon. Unlike Roy, Luminous did not see Clayman as nothing other than a pebble on the side of the road. She could dispose of him instantly if she so wanted to. May I ask why that is? Think about it for a second. Luminous continued walking forward. That phenomenon had nothing to do with those demon lords, which means it was either natural or caused by one or more individuals. Roy guessed Luminous's next words. Indeed. And considering the amount of magicules reported by Lewis, the individual or individuals must be quite formidable. Perhaps at the level of an awakened demon lord. I see, it is as you say, my queen. Roy acknowledged Luminous's insight. Clayman has already deduced that as well. Thus, he will try to make contact with the people responsible and try to manipulate them, Luminous continued. As expected of you, my queen, to be able to see his intentions with a single glance. Roy was honestly impressed, although he was quite biased toward his mistress, and so everything she did sounded good in his ears. Luminous sighed deeply as she understood what was going through Roy's mind. Regardless, what do you think would happen if Clayman tried to toy with such formidable people? Exactly. He would be eradicated from existence. Indeed. Roy nodded as Luminous passed for a second. Clayman is heavily underestimating that threat, and that will end up in both his and his plans, doom. That is why we do not need to do anything with him, because he will eventually self-destruct. I understand. Here, we have arrived. Luminous came to a stop. They were now standing right outside of the Jura forest. So, shall we go in? Leaving those words behind, the Queen of Nightmares entered the territory of the ruler of monsters. Hollow diamond. Rimuru's perspective. It was currently nighttime the day after Seal did her, as expected of Seal, thing and got knocked out by me. Well, I said knocked out, but she was in that state only for about 10 minutes, after which she entered the meeting hall again yelling, "Da, RLING." This Seal has not completely reflected from what happened. I think she needs a bit more punishment. It was at that point that I decided to lock her in my imaginary space. Seal tried to resist, of course, but at the end, she got trapped while she yelled. This is not the type of punishment I like. To think she was so calm and conserved when we first arrived at this timeline. Anyway. She would normally be able to escape by controlling Void God Azathoth, but I made sure to remove her access to the skill before she managed to. It was something like removing admin benefits to someone on a server back on Earth. Anyway, thanks to that, I managed to finish my explanation to Benimaru and his father, and they immediately departed to their village to think of countermeasures. I offered them protection, of course, but they refused pridefully. Worry not, Rimuru no, we ogres are not so weak to lose against some orcs. I really felt they were raising a death flag, but even if I said that, nothing would change. The problem is not that they're overconfident in their abilities, but rather that they don't want to depend on someone else. I can respect that. Anyway, what am I doing right now, you might be wondering. PFF'd. I can't hear anything. I can't hear anything. I can't hear anything. Mama. Papa. Right now, I am in the kitchen together with Seal and Riley. Seal is currently wearing her usual gray hoodie and a pair of jeans with her hair tied up in a ponytail. She was sitting a bit away from my position while looking at me while covering her laughing face with her hand. It wasn't working, though, so it was pretty easy for anybody to see that she was laughing at me. Riley, on the other hand, tilted her head in confusion as she looked between Seal and I. She was wearing her bright red hair in a single ponytail like her mother, and was wearing a cute white hoodie with the sleeves rolled up, a skirt, and a frilly pink apron on top of it all. What about me, you say? Well, I am wearing a pair of jeans similar to that of Seal, a plain white t-shirt, and on top of it all, an apron. I think I am wearing something pretty normal, to be honest. So then, why was Seal laughing, and why was my face bright red? That's because the apron I am wearing is just like that of Riley. We are wearing matching aprons, you could say. And, well, they're frilly pink. I am dying from embarrassment right now. PFF'd. Don't laugh. Quote. So then, if I am so embarrassed and Seal cannot stop laughing at my figure, why is it that I am currently here in this situation? That's an easy question. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. A couple of minutes ago. Papa. I was sitting on a chair doing absolutely nothing, because unlike in the main timeline, here there isn't any paperwork to do, yet. Listening to the voice of my most beloved daughter, I turned to look at her as she came up to me. About half an hour ago, she had gone for a walk with Seal, and she looked fairly exhausted. Oh, Seal is now on normal mode, by the way. Yeah, she did, Ply reflected after I locked her away in the imaginary space for a bit earlier. She came out saying, hubby. 2 will not do that again, I promise. There was an extra murmur that said, not unless we are all alone, but I get the feeling it is best to ignore that part. Anyway, right now, Seal is the living image of the perfect woman and mother. I could see how she was entering the room behind Riley as I thought about all these things. What is it, sweetie? Riley wants to eat. She had both of her arms in a guts pose as she looked up at me with shining and hopeful eyes. Ah, too precious. Listening to some noise behind Riley, I turned to look at the door, and saw Seal leaning back on it while slowly sliding down. It seems the damage she received from Riley's cuteness was too big. RLING, I want to adopt Riley into the Tempest family, is that okay? What are you talking about? She is already our daughter, you remember. It seemed Ciel's CPU was burned from the damage received, but well, I'll inspect her later. Right now, I need to focus on this cute little creature in front of me who was starting to pout as she thought I was ignoring her. 2, right with you, sweetie. Did you say you wanted to eat? Riley gave me a brief nod, but she was still pouting. She used her little hands to clear the small tears that had formed in her purple eyes, and then turned up again to look at me. So, what would you like to eat? I asked. No, Riley began shaking her head left and right in denial. Didn't she say she was hungry? Riley wants to cook with Papa and then eat that. Cook? I was a bit confused. I mean, yeah, I have no problem with doing it, but wouldn't she prefer to do it with Seal? I am quite certain that there shouldn't be a better cook than Seal in her calculative skills. Yup. Riley's previous pouting face had completely disappeared, and now she had in exhibition her brightest smile. I haven't even said I accept, though. Okay, let's do it, but, I mean, even though I hadn't accepted yet, there was simply no way I could say no to that angelic face. Yay, Mama. Papa said that it was okay. Riley turned back and ran straight at Seal in joy. She jumped directly at her mother's chest and Mama Seal caught her perfectly and held her in arms. Good for you, honey. Seal smiled as she ordered Riley's hair, which had messed up a bit by the sudden run from side to side of the room. As expected of Mama Seal, she always keeps her daughter's cuteness at maximum points. Will you let Mama have some of your cooking too? Yup, Mama can eat my cooking too. That's great, then. Mama can't wait anymore. Seal smiled brightly. It was a true smile that hid nothing. Right now, at this moment, Seal was happy. She had mentioned being happy many times in the original timeline as she continued developing her emotions as Amana's, but it was the first time I could honestly see that she was indeed happy. It is gladdening, to be honest. One of the reasons for coming to this timeline was to allow Seal to experience something outside of being Amana's, and seeing her enjoy herself like this just fills my heart with something. And staring at that smile of hers, my heart undoubtedly skipped a beat. My, are you perhaps charmed by my beauty? Seal, who noticed my surely dumb expression, turned to look at me and questioned in a teasing tone. Yes, I think I am. I was still in a daze, so I really didn't process the answer in my head at all. Those words were literally the first thing that came to my mind. Raw, unfiltered feelings. BB Baka. Seal hid her free hand in her hoodie's sleeve and used it to cover her now blushed face. But, I am happy. Her shy smile and reddened cheeks were enough to make me feel like a maiden in a dating game. If this truly was one of those games, Seal would have already won the Rimuru route 1,000 times with that single action. Gulp. Okay, now it was my turn to blush. I turned around, embarrassed. I know we are supposed to be married and all that, but, you know, we're still new at this. Mama and Papa, are you okay? Your faces are red. Really was looking bewildered at Seal and I. She was not able to understand what was going on. We're okay, Yays get cooking, okay. I clapped my hands together and prompted the conversation to move on. I began picking up some stuff I had on the table and stored it in my imaginary space to get ready to leave. Why yeah, that's right. Honey, let's get going. Seal hurriedly followed my lead and opened the door while still carrying Riley. It was kind of cute the way she was using her daughter as a shield to cover her beatered face. Not that I'm the one to judge, though, as I took my blue scarf out of my imaginary space and rolled it all around my neck and face for the same reason as her. Yays go already. I walked toward Seal and Riley, who were still standing at the door, and prompted them to go on ahead. After they did, I closed the door behind us, and we began making our way toward one of the newly built kitchens in the village. Eventually, we arrived, and that is when we encountered a second situation. Papa, why is Riley's thingy different? Riley was standing right beside me and pointing at the frilly pink apron I had just prepared for her. She was constantly looking between my light blue apron and her own. Of course, when I made them, I was simply thinking of which one would be better looking for each one of us. In Riley's case, her frilly pink apron matched well with her beautiful red hair, and in my case, my light blue apron made a good combination with my blue hair. That was really all that I was thinking, but Papa doesn't want to wear the same thingy as Riley. Just as before in the room when she came to pick me up, her eyes started to fill with tears and her face saddened. How cruel, Papa. That is one hell of an unneeded comment from the bully I have as a wife. I briefly admonished Seal with my stare, causing her to go, "Ah, I think I'm in love," before kneeling down and looking at Riley directly into her eyes. No, that's not it, sweetie. I simply thought that this one was going to look right cute on you. I gently cleaned off her tears with my hands as I spoke to her. Hick Riley. I nodded at Riley's counter question and smiled gently at her. But Riley wants to be the same as Papa. She was looking longingly at my own apron. It was easy to make another apron, but I really wanted to see her wear her frilly pink one, because it made her look so cute. Foo, then why don't you make an apron like Riley's for yourself? Seal, reading my mind as always, presented me with the other option that I really wanted to avoid considering. Why? Because it's embarrassing, and Seal knows that. That's why she is now smiling smugly at me. Seal, you bully. Ooh, Mama is so smart. Riley seemed to agree with Seal's idea, and now I was between a rock and a hard place. No, that's not true. It is a decision between my pride and my beloved daughter's happiness. It is an easy choice. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. And thus, here I am right now, observing Seal laughing and Riley waiting for instructions to begin the cooking. I began slowly taking out all of the ingredients we would need from my imaginary space. I had already created them on the way here through God of Creation, Shub-Niggurath. Riley stood in her stool as she moved around the ingredients in what looked to be a good position for her. Today, we were using onion, vegetable oil, ground beef and pork meat, a bit of salt, black pepper, nutmeg, breadcrumbs, milk, eggs, and many others to prepare hamburger steaks. Riley loves to eat hamburger steaks every time Seal makes them, and I really wanted her to try my own. What? I have my pride as a father, you know. I want my daughter to eat my food too. HMMPH. What are you talking about? Me, sulking. I am not sulking, you are sulking. Papa, really brought me back from my brief argument with someone, as she tilted her head curiously from her position in her stool. Don't mind it, let's begin. With those words, I began the preparation of the dish. I first began by mincing the onions finely. I first sliced every onion in half, and placed the flat side down on the cutting board I had also prepared beforehand. I began making horizontal slices, taking care of keeping the onion's root intact. Then, I grabbed the horizontal pieces of onion and began vertically slicing them while paying close attention to the process. Riley was also paying close attention to this, and so, Papa. Riley's eyes want to cry. Riley turned to look at me with moist eyes. Don't worry, Papa's eyes want to cry too. I directed a glance at her with moist eyes. At times like this, it would be better to be in slime form. PFFFFFFFFT. Excluding that last mocking laughter from the background, it could be said that we kind of survived the phase of cutting the onions. After having all of the minced onions gathered together, I turned on the stove and placed a large pan over it. Afterwards, I added a bit of oil into the pan, and then added the onions to fry them. I continued sautéing them until they became nearly translucent. Papa, can Riley help? Riley had sparkling eyes as she looked at me in expectation. Nope, it's dangerous. But don't worry, I will need your help very soon, okay? Riley seemed a bit disappointed and pouted a bit, but she seems to understand that no is no right now. In response to that, I could see a proud smile forming on Ciel's face, as if to say, foo, as expected of my daughter. Papa, smoky. Riley raised her index finger and pointed at the pan that I had stopped paying attention to in order to answer her question. I turned back, and wah, it was indeed smoking. I panicky took it out of the stove and tried to cool it off the best I could. Of course, there was no way that would end well. I poured the burnt onions into a bowl and left them to cool. After they did, I let Riley add the meat into the bowl, along with a bit of salt, black pepper, and nutmeg. After that, came the milk, eggs, and breadcrumbs. Ooh, it's messy. It doesn't look like hamburger steak. Riley stared at the mix of ingredients in awe. The mix of all the things we added looked messy indeed, and the burnt onions really didn't help at all. Yup, that's because there are still some steps left. I kind of mixed a bit of truth and lie, and then grabbed a spatula that was placed on the table to begin mixing all the ingredients together. Riley didn't miss a second of that process, as she kept her eyes directly staring at the ingredient bowl with surprise written on her face. I guess she is really shocked to know that this is how one of her favorite dishes is made. After it became sticky and somewhat pale, I divided the mix of ingredients in segments, and used each one of them to form the shape of a hamburger steak. Riley did some as well with her own little hands and excited eyes. That being said, they do not look like hamburger steaks. No. Riley and I were looking at the several hamburger steaks that we shaped and placed on a large tray. Just as I pointed out, they didn't look like hamburger steaks at all, beginning with their weird shape that was definitely not a circle or oval. In addition, the burnt pieces of onion could be seen in the midst of the meat and other ingredients. It really did not look like hamburger steak. Ciel didn't laugh at all at our creations this time, but rather was looking at us with very warm eyes and smiling gently. Maybe it would be a good idea to ask her for help. Mama, help Riley and Papa. As always, Riley was quicker than I, and prompted Ciel into action. Riley and Papa don't know how to make hamburger steaks. Foo, of course, honey. Looking as if she was expecting it, Ciel stood up in a flash and placed on a frilly pink apron just like Riley's and mine. In less than 10 seconds, she had already rolled up the sleeves of her hoodie and was standing by my side. She thoroughly washed her hands on the sink, and then struck a guts pose and said, "Leave it to Mama." Well, it's good to know she is inspired. In what appeared to be a few minutes, Ciel not only finished up several perfectly shaped hamburger steaks with the mix Riley and I made, but also took out even more ingredients and replicated all we had done up till now, but correctly, of course. Mama, amazing. Riley entered a guts pose with her eyes turned into stars. She was hopping lightly on the spot with excitement. Wow, Ciel, so amazing. Meanwhile, I was in a daze from the reminder of the gap in our abilities. Ciel really is incredible. Ha, I'll teach both of you how to do it later, okay? Ciel smiled and laughed and placed her perfect set of hamburger steaks together with the ones Riley and I made, and placed them within the imaginary space which we would use as a fridge replacement. Why don't you guys go set up the table? I'll finish up here. Seal smiled as she grabbed some other ingredients from the imaginary space to prepare what was left. Okay. Leave it to Riley and Papa. I was about to offer my help to Seal, but Riley got down from her stool and began pulling on my hand, leading me into the room right beside, where there was a table and some chairs. We did what we were told, and placed everything we needed to have a nice dinner. Riley placed napkins on the table with utmost care while I placed glasses and plates. Just as we were finishing, Seal came out of the table carrying a tray with 3 different plates in it. On the first plate, you could see a bunch of fruits and vegetables to eat along with the food. Riley saw those and paled, going, "Ugh. I mean, it is normal for a kid to hate vegetables, right?" In the second plate, there were perfectly shaped and prepared hamburger steaks. It could be clearly appreciated the detail put into them. They had also been covered in a sauce that I guess Seal prepared while Riley and I were busy setting the table. They looked so good that it wouldn't be weird to use them as sample pictures for a magazine or restaurant menu. The third and final plate contained several abnormal shaped hamburger steaks with some small dot points here and there, which I guess were the burnt onions. They had also been covered in the same sauce, but it was pretty clear these hamburger steaks were not entirely made by Seal. And of course that's true, for this were the ones made by Riley and I. Seal placed the 3 plates on the table, and we all sat down in a U shape, with Riley at the head. She barely reached the table, though, so I took out a pillow from my imaginary space for her to sit on. Now that we were all set, we set out to eat as a perfectly normal family. All 3 of us began with the hamburger steaks made by Riley and I. We took a bite, and surprisingly, they're edible. Yup. I voiced my thoughts, and Riley agreed after me. The hamburger steaks weren't really good, but at least they were at the edible level. I'll take that as a win for today. Foo, I think they're lovely. While Riley and I had disappointed faces, Seal was all smiles while she ate through her hamburger steak. I mean, these were done by my dearest family, you know. Even though you messed up tea in the process, I can really see that you did your best on them. There is no way in the world I will ever dislike them. Do you really see me as that kind of cold woman who wants everything to be perfect? Kind of. How rude. Seal pouted after reading my mind as always. Anyway, as I was saying, I like your cooking. Not because of its taste, but because it was made by you guys, the people I love. Mama. IWUVU. Riley was looking at Seal with a warm, gentle smile full of love. That's the only way I can describe it. I was smiling as well. It was a good comment from Seal, it really made me happy, I'm not gonna lie. I love you too, honey. Seal smiled in response as leaned forward in her chair and delivered a kiss to Riley's forehead. Then, she returned to leaning back on her seat and looked at me with expectful eyes. Sealson, Riley is here, you know. It is embarrassing to say it, you know. I guess that's true, then, I'll be waiting later tonight, when we're all alone. Blush. Seal was trying to tease me, I guess, but she ended up taking it too far and ended up red from ear to ear in embarrassment. But, I will be waiting, okay. Her voice was merely a whisper, but I was able to hear it clearly with my godly specs. Blush. Seal and I both turned away to hide our embarrassment, and really simply stared at us in confusion. There's no need for you to understand what we're talking about, I patted her head as if to say that. Riley relaxed her eyes as a puppy and continued eating. This time, however, she decided to take a bite off one of Ciel's hamburger steaks. Ooh, mamas really are the best. As expected, she seemed to prefer Ciel's cooking. I am not hurt by that, though. I also prefer Ciel's cooking over my own, after all. Ciel was delighted at her reaction and also began eating happily. She was eating what Riley and I prepared. I was about to dig in as well, but at that moment, the barrier I placed around the village was triggered. Said barrier is basically a thick layer of magicules surrounded by a partial, null barrier from one side. Its functioning is pretty simple. It uses its magicules to repel low-level monsters, and informs me if anything not scared by them enters the range by calculating the displacement of the magicules. In addition, depending on the amount of magicules displaced, one can guess a bare approximate of the strength of whoever crossed it. Disguising one's magicules would not work, because even if not releasing them, magicules would still be stocked inside the body, and so when the person or thing crosses, it will inevitably collide with those magicules of the barrier. And right now, I sensed two relatively strong people crossing the barrier. Darling. Seal noticed as well, as she has access to whatever I have. She helped me design this barrier too, by the way. Don't worry, you two can continue eating. I slowly stood from my chair, leaving my food nearly untouched on the table. I'll take care of it. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. Third person's perspective. A few seconds later, Rimuru had already arrived at the place in the village's border where the barrier was triggered. In front of him, two people were standing. One was blonde, tall, toned, and quite intimidating. Everything about him yelled he was a big fish. Behind him, a woman in a maid uniform stood. She had eyes of different colors, and silky silver hair running down her back. HMPH, Ciel's hair is better, Rimuru thought as he observed her. That's right. Unlike most people would, Rimuru was currently warily eyeing the woman rather than the man. If it was a normal person, his attention would normally be diverted toward the guy who looks the most dangerous, aka Roy Valentine, but right now, Rimuru was just observing the Queen of Nightmares, Luminous Valentine. I would like to talk to this village's chief. Roy began talking arrogantly, not bothering at all about introducing himself or anything of the sort. Who are you? Rimuru completely ignored him and asked a question back, feigning ignorance about knowing his identity. I said, I would like to talk to this village's chief. Roy's tone now also had a bit of irritation added on top of its original arrogance. And I said, who are you? Rimuru didn't call it quits. Why would he? This was his village, and he wasn't forced to answer anything to the little fake demon lord standing in front of him. Normally, Rimuru would have been open to discussion without any problems, but right now it's a different case. You little, Roy had already gone past his boiling point. Never in his life had he been mocked so hard by a nobody. Even all day long as he visited several other villages in Jura along with Luminous, everybody looked at him with fear and respect. Nobody dared defy this man. Stop it, Roy. Luminous stopped Roy just as he decided to explode against Rimuru. She began walking forward, and before Roy was able to say something, she continued speaking. This guy right here already knows my true identity. Isn't that right? It was at this point that Roy comprehended it. His arrogance was too blinding, but if he'd paid attention more closely, he would have noticed Rimuru was never interested in him. Hence Rimuru's wariness of the woman who was supposed to be a simple maid. Let me see, you are a demon lord, aren't you? Luminous raised her eyebrows in surprise as Rimuru said this. Ho, I indeed am. My name is Luminous Valentine, one of the 10 great demon lords who rule over this world. Quite interesting that he doesn't appear to be nervous or frightened, Luminous thought as she introduced herself. Who might you be? You're not just a random villager, are you? I am just a man who is very pissed off because he was interrupted just as he was having a lovely dinner with his wife and daughter. Both Luminous and Roy looked completely shocked at the unexpected answer. And so, I will have to ask you to leave so I can return to my lovely family time. Rimuru turned around and began walking back into the village, as if to say this conversation was over. You are in front of a demon lord. Show some respect. Roy was spouting something angrily, but Rimuru just ignored him and continued walking. Insulted at being ignored, Roy flew into the air and tried to activate a skill or spell on the whole village. You really should learn how to discipline your personnel. Rimuru stopped walking and turned to look at the sky. There, Roy was about to use his most characteristic art, Blood Ray. The sky, which had been completely dark up to this point, began turning a blood red. Azathoth. In response to Roy's hostility, Rimuru raised one arm into the sky, releasing a mass of pitch black. It flew with precision into the air, wrapping the bewildered Roy in mere seconds. Then, the black mass collapsed into itself, and disappeared back into Rimuru's hand. The sky began slowly turning back to its night darkness, and Rimuru retreated his arm and turned his gaze toward Luminous. She had a poker face on, as if she didn't care at all about what just happened. That being said, such thought was only occurring on the surface, as in the inside, Luminous was currently very shaken. Not because of Roy's death itself, but rather about the fact that someone was able to defeat Roy so easily. Roy was not weak by any means. Luminous herself recognized his strength, yet he was defeated by the man in front of her without even breaking a sweat. Still, Luminous was not nervous or scared. Even though Roy was indeed strong, Luminous was far stronger than him. She was only at this forest to gather information about the Magicule disaster, but she ended up finding something 1,000 times more interesting. No, that event and this guy are probably related. That was the only conclusion she could arrive at. Demon Lord Luminous. Rimuru was starting to get impatient from Luminous's silence. She, on the other hand, was so deep in thought she completely forgot she was still in front of him. I could play with you too, but I kind of don't want to allow my food to get cold, so I'll let you go. Rimuru started waving his hand at her, as if to say, go, you can go now. Don't get cocky just because you killed my retainer. Luminous looked at him in disgust. You're the one who caused yesterday's magicule explosion, aren't you? It was only at this point that Rimuru asked himself, actually, what is Luminous doing here? A bit late to ask that question, but well. Explosion. Rimuru started searching through his mind, nothing came up. He brought up a hand to his chin in deep thought. Explosion, 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 of magicules. Ah, she's talking about Seal and Veldora's sparring, isn't she? Yeah, I guess I am related to that, although it mostly has to do with my brother. Rimuru began talking leisurely, not noticing at all that he was saying too many details. Your brother, is it? Where is him? I have to talk to him. Luminous began giving a few steps forward, informing Rimuru that she was planning to enter the village. Sorry, no can do. That old man is surely sleeping by now. Rimuru moved toward her a few steps, standing in her way to inform her that he won't let her into the village. I am sorry, I guess I must insist. On that last word, Luminous delivered a blow at Rimuru. It was a blow that, if received by a normal person, would not allow even flesh to remain. She wasn't holding back at all. And I said, no, can do. Sadly for her, Rimuru was not a normal person. In fact, he was the lively representation of rarity. He caught her blow with a single fist and minimal movements. Luminous raised her eyebrow in surprise. It seems she had really underestimated him. I see. I should get going then. Luminous could sense that Rimuru truly had no intention of letting her into the village. She thought for a second that it might have been a good idea to force her way in, but there is no way of knowing if she could even win against him. Not after what she had seen. Luminous turned back away from the village and began walking away. Suddenly, however, she stopped and turned around. Oh, one more thing. Her beautiful eyes shone in contrast with the dark background of the nighttime forest. Who are you? A simple slime that wants to live and have fun with his family. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. Huh, where am I? Somewhere deep inside Rimuru's imaginary space, a blond man opened his eyes and lifted his body from the pit of the endless. He started looking around, but all he was able to see was pure white. No, that's not true. There was someone in there with him. It had a head and body made of flames, and was sitting in a cross-legged posture with his arms crossed and eyes closed. It was none other than the second most recent prisoner of the imaginary space, Ifrit. Welcome to life's final destination.